next speaker, who is someone I respect so much, is the CEO of Dreammaker Incorporation. Isaac Olowolafe Jr. is an award-winning real estate broker, entrepreneur, angel investor, and philanthropist. I like the philanthropist part. Isaac's corporation, Dreammaker Incorporation, successfully operates multiple divisions, including a brokerage, real estate development, wealth management, property management, education, private equity, and insurance. In 2016, Isaac launched Dreammaker Ventures, a private equity firm that provides mentorship and capital to small and medium-sized businesses. In 2017, that's a year later, the Dreammaker Development Division celebrated the completion of its first major mixed-use development, condos, townhome, retail, called Dream Residence at Yorkdale, located across the Yorkdale Mall, and has more than 10 other developments on the way across the GTA. Isaac received a Bachelor in Economics from the University of Toronto. He has received numerous awards and recognition, including a Harry Jerome Business Award, an Enterprise Business Award by Planet Africa, an ABO Award from the University of Toronto, a Business Leadership Award by Leadership and Governance Canada Inc., and a Public Service Award from the Transformation Institute of Leadership and Innovation. In addition to his membership in the Rising Innovation Circle, Isaac is a member of the advisory board of the DMZ at Rising. In 2015, Isaac made a generous $100,000 donation, which named the Dreammaker Reality Digital Media Experience Lab in Rising Ionic Student Learning Center. Can you please welcome with me Isaac Olowolafe? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I want to congratulate my sister that was just speaking on real estate and on generational wealth. She spoke very well on it, so I'm going to shift the topic to more so talk as a whole on the value of real estate and the value of infrastructure when it is dealing with our community because of the organization that's here today. As mentioned in the bio, I'll just talk a little bit briefly about myself. I was also fortunate, my parents, when they came here from Nigeria, would have been in 1987 when I was 4 years old. My dad came here originally, went to university, came back, got married, and then had me 35 years ago. And when I came here at 4 years old, we lived in Jane and Finch area, and then we moved to Martin Grove and Albion. And I was fortunate, while in elementary school, my elementary teacher convinced my parents to move us to Woodbridge, because at that time I was playing soccer, and they felt that I'll be scouted better when I moved to Woodbridge. So we made that shift and sacrifice to move to Woodbridge. And what my parents did, which sort of sparked the aspect of investment, is that they sacrificed and kept the home that they first bought at Martin Grove and Albion and moved to Woodbridge to buy another home. And when you think about that, was almost 25 years ago. They paid $350. So when you think about 25 years ago paying $350,000 for about 1,200 square feet bungalow in Woodbridge, it was a big sacrifice while still maintaining the other house, which they ended up turning into a rooming house. Fast track the story, the environment that I was in, which is very important. I see some youth here and some kids. Environment is very important. I was put in an environment predominantly Italians, and soccer didn't end up going the way that God had planned, but he had other plans for me. And while I was building relationship, a lot of my friends, a lot of their fathers, also with my dad as well too, being in real estate, was always talking about real estate and development. So I knew that was something in the future I wanted to do. I got into University of Toronto and taken economics, first computer science, then economics. And then I started to realize that economics was as much as possible was good, and I needed to graduate from university, because that's what my parents really loved me to do at U of T. So I still made sure I did that, but at the same time launched Dreammaker Realty, the first company, about 14 years ago. So when I launched Dreammaker Realty, it was just an investment company to buy real estate. Bought my first property at 21 at Kipling and Steele's, Marbrook, for $120,000. At that time, interest rates was 6.7%, zero down, 40-year amortization. A lot of people thought, as a 21-year-old, why am I buying a property that will take 40 years to pay off? But all I wanted to do was get into the system. One thing that is lacking within our community is that we don't understand the system, and that's why we're not maximizing in the system. So for me, I wanted to get into the system early, understand it, master it, and be an expert in it. Not when I'm 30, 40, 50, but before I was 25. So I bought my first property. To service that property, worked a midnight shift at UPS, 4 or 5 hours every night while at U of T, and I took the tuition reimbursement to cover the supplement of rent, because the rent at that time was $1,200, but because I did a 6.7% zero down mortgage, I had to add $200 to $300, which a lot of people thought that was also crazy, but understanding economics and numbers, every year that was a tax deduction on whatever income I was getting from UPS, so I actually was getting that money back. So I didn't do RRSPs. Instead, I put into my real estate, which was also a tax deduction, the same way RRSP was. But whenever I want to take money out, I don't have to wait until I'm retired at 65. I could do it right away, tax-free. Fast track 14 years, because interest rates kept on going down and I kept on making the same payments, that property that should have taken 40 years to pay off was paid off in 13 years, right? So that's one example, and I still have that property there, so I could show my kids of sort of where the start of Dreammaker happened. Over the last 10 years, starting to understand the real estate market and studying other communities, I realized that it was not only important to buy real estate, but was to understand the supply of it. So that's when we now start to launch other divisions to complement what we were doing. So after my first 3-4 properties, I realized we needed to manage those properties. So I launched Dreammaker Management to start managing those properties, managing over 300 properties in the GTA. And then we launched the wealth management arm, Dream Fund Holdings, for investors that didn't have the appetite to buy real estate, but wanted the security of real estate and a joint venture of going into real estate. So we launched Dream Fund Holdings. So for 7 years and over $1 billion worth of transactions, what our company did was work with developers, buy wholesale. A lot of people understand buying and wholesale, especially I know a lot of family or friends, they buy cars wholesale, sell it in Nigeria or in Ghana at a premium. That's what we were doing in real estate. We went to the developers through Dreammaker Realty, brokered 40, 50 units, and at that time I was still living at home, so I didn't really have any need for the commission. So instead of getting paid the commission, I said, give it to me in units. So we did that on over 50 projects around the GTA, and as each project was finishing, we'll convert it to Dreammaker Management to manage it. But 6 years ago, we realized the lack of access to supply, and the only value of buying real estate if you're buying it at a good price. Yes, you could buy and wait for it to grow, but that's speculative. For us, we wanted to make sure that we were winning right from the buy, and that's when we launched Dreammaker Developments. So by launching Dreammaker Developments, we sort of control the vertical, where a brokerage firm will secure the land and market it. Dreammaker Development will develop it and build it, and once it's built, Dreammaker Management will manage the individual units, and Dreammaker Property Management will manage the actual building. And as we've seen over the last couple of years, the market has started to shift a little bit, so as a result of that, we've shifted our strategies from not just condos, but to stacked townhouses, room-in houses, and just around the corner from here, we'll be launching by December our first boutique hotel. And then also short-term rental strategies as well too. The purpose of me saying all this is that in each of the pieces that we built was all around infrastructure. So the topic I'm going to talk about briefly is how can the Black community create generational wealth using infrastructure? What is infrastructure? Infrastructure is the structure needed for operations of a community and the services and facilities necessary for economic growth within our community. So if we look at a building like this, Hilton, this is an infrastructure. If you think about within our community, how many types of infrastructure like this exist within our community will give us a sense of how much economic development or growth we're doing in our community. I think we could maybe mention it on one hand, how many infrastructures like this we have in our community. What is a community? A community is a self-organized network of people with common agenda, like the group that's here. Cause or interest who collaborate by sharing ideas, information, and resources. The key words there is sharing ideas and collaborating. So you gotta ask yourself, how often do we see businesses from our community collaborating, sharing ideas and resources so that we could grow together? What is generational wealth? As mentioned, my sister shared a lot of information on what generational wealth is. It's the aspect of financial planning, thank you, geared towards passing down resources to future generation. The key word is passing down. All of us see around us, whether we're in Brampton, Richmond Hill, or in Toronto, or in Ajax, other communities that have benefited, especially Woodbridge, utilizing infrastructure. The Jewish community, Chinese community, Italian community, you could go on and on. Next week, or in 2 weeks, there's an election, and this is why this is even more important. So the question is, are we positioned as a community to establish more infrastructure? Are we in influential positions? Are we the councilors? Are we the MPs? Are we the MPPs? Are we developers? Are we builders? Are we institutional leaders at the banks so that we can make strategic moves? What is the importance of infrastructure? A building like this that cost $100 million to build, that's the creation of $100 million worth of jobs. When there's a creation of $100 million worth of jobs and the money is being circulated within our community, that's wealth being created within our community and the ability to leverage each other within the community so that we could grow. The reason why that's important, when I bought my first property, I was able to leverage. When I wanted to buy my second, my third property, I collaborated with 1 or 2 individuals until I said, okay, I have enough base to continue to buy more. If we don't have individuals we could collaborate with, then it's harder for us to grow. When you see some of the largest developers, they collaborate together and they say, let's buy 100 acres. You have 25 acres, you have 25 acres, you have 25 acres, I have 25 acres. And let's make sure that the first 20 to 30% of the sales goes to our friends and family. And then let's launch it to the public. So they're guaranteeing generational wealth, not just talking about it. 4 types of infrastructure that we need to continue to focus on to build within our community. Economic, banking and finance. Example, credit union, which is lacking. Social, medical, public sector. Example, retirement homes and hospitals, which is also lacking. Third one, cultural and recreational, which is hospitality, tourism, churches. We have a lot of churches, but we're missing on the convention centers and the hotels within our community. If you add up those four pieces, that's what's creating economic wealth. Now, you can't talk about economic wealth as a community if we don't understand it from an individual point of view. So now, how do we understand it from an individual point of view? Very quickly, I'm going to talk about 2 types of individuals. There's the 99 percentile and then there's the 1 percentile. In both situations, they're both earning income. Whether you're a doctor making a couple $100,000 a year or you're working at a warehouse making $40,000 a year, it doesn't matter how much you're making. I was making $12 an hour when I was 21 working at UPS, and I bought 2 properties because I understood how to save the little money that I was actually making while still paying tithes and while still giving. But it's what you do with that money. So the 99% are spending it on cars and house and vacation, because your home is not an asset if you're the one paying it. And they're living paycheck to paycheck, chasing a lifestyle, and not creating future wealth and working toward until 60. In that scenario, you get into that trap within 1 to 12 months. The good cycle is like what everyone's doing here. On a Saturday afternoon, they're coming and learning information on how to invest. Whether it be in bonds, real estate, insurance, it doesn't really matter. The key is the education. But then after the education is learning how could I take part in it? Not in 5 years or in 10 years, even if it's just one simple condo, a studio, one single bond investment. The key is starting. And the faster you start it, then you're able to leverage. The faster you leverage it, then you're able to grow. But that's a process that takes 5 to 15 years. And some people may say, wow, that's a long time. But anybody that has a child, I have 3 daughters, 8, 5, and 3, if someone tells me 10 years is a long time, I laugh. I say, my youngest will only be 13. So that's definitely not a long time. So if I'm not planting a seed right now, then what am I really doing? Right? So those are the mindset of generational wealth. So to conclude, because of time, and I know we have Q&A after, generational wealth mindset, key position, and infrastructure will equal economic development. Once we have economic development, we'll have a sustainable community. Once we have a sustainable community, it wouldn't be only one-off individuals doing wealth in the community, but as a whole, all of us doing wealth. Thank you.
One quick or one or two quick questions for him. Anybody who has a question? Okay. I hope the question is not because I told you he's a philanthropist. He has not written my check yet.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was very enlightening. What do you think about the multi-family units in terms of investment?
That's a great question. The more rooms you have in a property, the more rent you're able to generate, the harder it is to manage, but as a whole, the more value you're generating. In Toronto's a very expensive city. It's going to continue to get more expensive. Everyone's been saying it's been expensive 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, and the market has gone up, it went down, it softened up, it went up, and it went down, and now we're in a balanced market. When the market was so hot, people moved to the outskirts because they thought it was cheaper to buy real estate. But for us, we focus more on value. So we'll rather spend $1 million in the city where there's value than $300,000 because it's outside the city and it's easier to get a mortgage. I'd rather wait until I could buy value. So we focus on value within the city. And if you take notice on what's happening in Toronto, you'll see a lot of money is coming to the city from different fundamental factors. The biggest factor is technology, right? So downtown now you're seeing Microsoft put in $500 million. They're launching jobs. They're going to be setting up thousands of jobs. Uber's investing $200 million. Intel is investing $100 million. They're creating jobs of not 50,000, 60,000, but $120,000, $150,000 jobs. And not all of them are going to want to buy, because most people now, they don't really need to buy. So what's going to happen is they're going to drive up rent. But not everyone could even live in a condo, because as many condos are being built, there's not enough, because there's over 150,000 people migrating to the city, and most of them want to come to concentrate into the downtown city. So now what's becoming more popular is co-living properties or multi-res properties. So for us, we've been buying a lot of older townhouses downtown, leveraging our construction division to renovate it, and we have 10 rooms with multiple kitchens on each floor and washrooms, and we're doing shared rental. And then we're buying buildings, and then we're doing short-term rental, utilizing Airbnb. Because if you buy a condo for $400,000, but you can only get about $1,500 a month for a one bedroom, you're not going to cover. right? And I know I didn't used to cover 14 years ago, but that was based on a $120,000 property, not a $400,000 property. So if you can convert that into a furnished rental and rent it at $3,000 a month at an average of $150 a night for 20 nights, that's $3,000, and your monthly expense is $2,000, you're now cash flowing on a $400,000 property $1,000. If you can't get into that same type of situation, then you're better off buying something for $800,000, doing a renovation, but having a duplex or a triplex in it, in the city, and then spend a little bit of money to manage it. But over a long period of time, that'll appreciate more. And when the market softens up, by the time it softens up in the city, then that's beyond a recession, right? When the market is softening up, it starts with the outskirts, and then it comes closer to the city. But by that time, because real estate is a lagging indicator, the market would already shifted around, which we've already started to see now.
Thanks, Isaac.